something, what do people normally say? No one likes change, right? I'm sorry? Well, you like change, and I never get that, Mark. Whenever I'm talking to my people, I say, we got some changes coming. They all look at it and say, no. But the funny thing is, as you've kind of intimated to, change isn't the enemy. If I were to say to you, the Battens, you didn't realize this, but I bought a lottery ticket for you, and you are now multimillionaires. Would you say to me, that's change, I don't like it, take it back? Now, granted, we're in church, so wealth is equal to sin, right? So we don't want to use that example. But if I were to say to any one of you out there, other than a small little group back there, if I could wave some magic hand, and while your age doesn't change, your body is that of what you were in your 20s. Would you say, oh no, I don't want that. I don't want health. If I were to say to Susan, do you like the new dentist? She'd say, no. That skinny guy back there, don't like him at all. He's like 75% of the man he used to be. And he looks good. And Dennis would probably say, I feel better. We had this conversation this morning, so I know what he would say. I planned ahead. But change does represent both good and bad. The challenge is that the good Lord speaks very much to, speaks to change quite a bit in various ways within the Bible. He says in Ecclesiastes 3:1-2, for everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted. In that environment, in those comparables, they represent very opposites of each other in a single change. A time to be born. We have Master Halen among us today, recently come into this world to wonderful parents. And we have death in our family here in this past week. It's a very tough thing. We struggle sometimes with why this change happened to us. See, people don't fear change, they fear loss. And that's the piece that's very different. Change is just evolution, right? We evolve. We're born, we evolve, we grow, we evolve, we get older. With that, we have our bodies that kind of go south, but our wisdom goes north. See? We have to manage the loss. That's the tough stuff. In every change, there is loss. For those in business, they call it opportunity costs, right? For me to take this pathway, I gain this, but nonetheless, I'm going to lose something else, right? And many times we look at things to say the opportunity costs are outweighed by the opportunity gained. As we get old, we lose our health in some ways, but we do have wisdom that we hope to share with the younger generations. In Deuteronomy, it tells us a little more about what is expected. See, God knows, Jesus knows, that in our lives there will be good times and bad times. That no matter what happens to us, He shares with us a little hope. To be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. The interesting thing about that is that we tend to not always remember this when it happens to us. When that insurmountable loss occurs, we don't remember to be strong and courageous. We as humans are self-centered by nature. It is what it is. I tell my leaders that the frontline staff are selfish and self-centered. And that's exactly what I expect him to be. Susan, I'm sure, can attain. She understands my world, being a nurse. You can. That when I was a bedside nurse, I wanted every holiday off, every weekend off. I wanted to go do what I wanted to do. I wanted vacation when I wanted vacation. And why wouldn't I? Right? We as humans are just simply self-centered. Now, whether God wired us that way, and I don't think he really did, but sin certainly has corroded that wiring. We see this in our culture and in our society today, and it is somewhat rampant. Jesus also takes a moment to give us a little bit of drive, and I cannot find it. In Philippians 4:6, he says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." It's hard not to be anxious. I've got a couple of stories, short stories, that I want to share with you. I have someone in my work life who is moving towards retirement. She is awesome at her job. As a matter of fact, I am very trepidatious as to when she will retire, because few people know and have her knowledge. But I'm also happy for her. She's given me a 6-month clock because she's that kind of employee. She knows to replace her will be challenging. Her wisdom, her level of knowledge in the area that she works in is a very challenging area. It's in the lab. And understanding all those things is quite challenging. But as she nears this milestone in her life, when things are supposed to be good, she's relatively young in the standards of retirement. Her husband has been a rancher all of their life. Hard worker. In all intents and purposes, I think they're good Christians. And just as we're embarking on that part, he has taken a southerly turn in his health in such a manner that I fear that her retirement years will not be her best. He's had repetitive heart attacks all of a sudden. He's currently, as we speak, in CVICU, having had another heart attack just 2 nights ago. If I were to say to her, be strong and courageous. Do not fear or have dread. She might hug me. She's not a hugger, but she might. More likely, she might hit me, because we don't understand. We can talk about don't be anxious, be strong and courageous until it happens to us. And what happens? We immediately turn inward. It's tough. I would, if you don't mind, from a silent prayer perspective, that you would keep that family in your prayers. Sitting down talking with another one of my employees yesterday. Long day. They work in the OR department. Dora can relate. It's not an easy place in the OR department. A lot of ego in the OR department. So it causes challenges. You manage. But I had a rare moment. I had gone up there to talk with one of the anesthesia providers and kind of went through our thing. But I saw one of my managers sitting there, and just as I tend to do when I'm out and about, I try to round and touch base with them. And I try to be very personable. Okay? I'm always willing to give a little piece of my personal self, how things are going. My kids and wife are at camp. I've been gone, been bacheloring it for a week. I don't know about you guys. That stinks. I don't like this plan. I'm used to noise in my life, and I need noise. As I was sharing with Mark, I need someone not bringing me problems, and my kids usually don't bring me problems. What they bring me is, hey, Dad, look at this, right? It's all positive, and they're excited about what they've got going on. Thereby, I become excited about what they've got going on, and it is my respite. So now I just work all day, and I come home and sit there by myself all night. It kind of stinks. I don't like this plan. So fortunately, I am getting ready to be faced with all I'll have left is Rachel. Better yet, all Rachel will have left is me. And so there might be, some challenges there for her, but nonetheless. But no, Kim and I Sat down. I saw her in her office. And I said, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. But I could tell, when you look at them and you ask it and your heart felt. It's not like, hey, how are you doing? Keep on walking. Hey, how are you doing? And no matter what they say, you can actually read it, right? So I sat there and we just chatted. I try not to ask what's wrong, but rather just to say, kind of chat with them. Talk a little bit about my life. That opens up the door. They talk a little bit about their life. And she said, I don't know if you know, but my son was just diagnosed with MS. And so I was standing there, and so she has a chair in her office, and so I sat down, and we commenced to talk. And it was predicated, this conversation was kind of predicated on the fact that she was excited about her granddaughter, who's 2. And it led into her telling me about her son, and then it led into her telling me about her son and his wife have split, the mother and father of that little girl. She went into the details of that. And so now we're talking about loss, change, on 2 levels. She's a mother. She's wise. She's lived a life that has had its ups and downs, like many of us or all of us. And she's looking at now 2 levels. Her son, who is struggling, who has not got a good diagnosis, who has taken that, unfortunately, that challenge, that loss, that change that he's experiencing, and has manifested in a negative way in his life. He doesn't know how to deal with it. And we talked a lot about that. I, however, did not pull up. Do not be anxious. Be strong and courageous. I just listened. I feel like that you have to work that in, but many people just need someone to hear. I tend to believe that Christ says these things to us, not for us to regurgitate to them, but for me to be strong and courageous when I'm talking to her. Me to create an environment of non-anxiety. Me to be the person that will be open to hearing what she has to say. We suffer loss so frequently. The older I get, the more my friends change, right? My bestest buddy from high school had a hip replacement. He's like 4 months older than I am. I'm thinking, dude, you are getting old. He loves it when I say that. He's got to have the other hip replaced too. It's like really old now. I don't know what happens in that 4 months, man, but tell me how to avoid it. He's like, man, I wish I could. Everything in our life is changing constantly. The challenge that I find when I quote Christ versus try to be like Christ is in kind of my final short story. Worked with a lady a few years back, not in this area. She lost her son when he was 12. And like any place in the South, when you are the new guy, they ask you a couple questions. The first one is, where are you from? Okay. And what church? Do you have a church family? That is on the heels of where you're from. Where are you from? Where's your church? So, as she normally would, she asked me that question. We were talking and getting to know each other, and we worked together for a number of years. And I knew her son had passed away. That was something you knew kind of right off the bat. It had happened about a year prior, so you know that doesn't ever change. It's all over them. And we were talking, and she in a moment of just sullen, kind of having a heart-to-heart conversation. She says, I used to go to this church. And she said, I could never quite understand it. We were talking about church and the difference in our approaches. And She had been Baptist and now was in a non-denominational church, and I like to talk about my church and why I believe what I believe and things of that nature. And she says, I left my church quite abruptly. I said, why? She said, right after my son died, several of the members came up. And she goes, I'm sure their intentions were good. They wanted to quote Christ in a way. And said, you must have some unaccounted for sin in your life. You must have done something really bad for your son to die like that. And she said, Steve, I pretty much just had to turn around and leave right then to never grace that doorstep again. See, my sermon today is about change. It's about how God innovates in that change in your life. And it's also about how you may innovate in others' lives changing. To be a good person doesn't mean to be a Christian. When you're a Christian, you are automatically a good person if you are true. If it is in your soul, God is in your heart, you are that person. Our text today, there we go. This isn't too bad, is it? For I know the plans I have for you. Uh-oh. Sorry. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and hope. See, there's another side to change. You suffer the losses. The two lowest points in my life were the day I found out that Lewis had diabetes and the day I left this organization at her hospital here. They represent the toughest times of my life, the times of profound loss. But there is another side to that. In the aspects of Lewis, we saw incredible blessing. We're not blessed because he has diabetes. That sucks, by the way. We're blessed because of the young man it's created in him. Now, I don't know what God's plans are for his life. Don't know what he has in store for me. But what I do know is that I am watching a young man have to grow up a little before his time, but is turning out to be quite the young man. I look at my daughter, and I see her evolution. Now, she's quite a handful, but she is amazing. And then I look at my little political beast who happens to be the round out of my youngest, and it's amazing to see that change. See, that's a lot like redemption. Many times you hear of people's redemption story. You read about it in the Bible. Oftentimes their redemption's based on their lowest points. Their opportunity to be challenged to a level that they can no longer stand. There are people that, respond to the gentle whispers of Christ in their heart, in their minds, and then there are the Irish. And sadly, they require the biggest baseball bat, as does the gentleman standing before you. Sometimes your path varies. But in the end, redemption is the most amazing thing that we have before us. It rounds out all of those promises to us. It rounds out the opportunity. I implore upon you today that when you encounter people around you, when you see opportunity of those, that you would take the opportunity to not tell them about Christ, but to show them who Christ is. When you look at that verse that stands behind me, I don't know if you've taken the time to read the story before it, but this comes on the tail end of the message from God to his people that were exiled. Depending on which verse or which Bible you look at, it talks about a letter, a communication to the survivors of the exile out of Babylon. You know, we look at this verse and, you know, God's got great things planned for me. He is telling them here to take a moment. You will not understand always why I do what I do, but I have a plan for you. And if you will just take a moment, that plan will be fulfilled in your life. And he promises us that it will not be for evil, but for good. That not only will it be for the good of those around you, but it will be good for you. I don't always understand why God lets me make the mistakes that I make. And let me tell you, I've made some doozies. But he has taken those opportunities to hopefully, I believe, make me a better man. An opportunity, hopefully, to influence those around me. To show them a kindness, a compassion, and a love that isn't quite as commonplace in our world today. I would ask that of you. Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all that you've given us, Lord. Thank you for what you've done in my life, in the lives of my children, and in my wife. Lord, I'd ask very much that you would be with the folks in this room today, in your house, and those who are unable to make it today. Lord, that you would keep them safe, but that you would help them focus. That the intent of these promises are to fulfill our lives. And your intent is for us to go out and fulfill others' lives. To share with them love, compassion, and kindness, no matter who they are, no matter what they do. To always turn the kind eye to them. Thank you for blessing us. Thank you for all that you do for us in every day.